Welcome back to part 2 of season 3 of episode 1. We're going to 11. This one goes to 11. We're starting out back up with question number 4. Question number 4. Should a non-grand tournament at a local gaming store be competitive, or should it be slightly fluffy? And with this, we're going to start with SolidSmurf.
It should be competitive because that's what a tournament is. It is a competition between two players playing with little plastic men.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Because we're down a couple of panelists, I feel the need to give 2 answers. First of all, from a success perspective from the tournament organizer, you have to understand your market and understand where the appeal is and you need to appease that market. So if you need to be more fluff-based, go for that because you want to attract people to these tournaments regardless. If you want it to be more competitive and they want it to be more competitive, then go that route. But from a purely generalistic perspective, it's a tournament. It's called a tournament for a reason. But that's my 2 answers. Either appeal to your market or it's a tournament, make it a tournament. Otherwise, call it something else.
All right. John, what's your thoughts? Should it be competitive or should it be slightly fluffy?
Oh, we went ahead with the question.
Tournaments.
Yep. Local tournaments should be dependent on what the area wants. I mean, if there's a group of people that wants to have tournaments, do tournaments. If you want to have a group of people who do fluffies, do fluffies. Because when GT rolls around, when Ardboys rolls around, that's when you can get the tournaments in for hardcore players. And if you want to have just these fun, fluffy tournaments every once in a while, that's fine too. Just be sure that you post it ahead of time. I cannot stress that enough. I want to know what I'm getting into before I go there.
Yes, John took my answer yet again. I agree. You have to just post it ahead of time. Whatever it is, but post it ahead of time. And if it doesn't meet your market and you have 2 people show up, that's a hint that either A, you need to change the style of your tournament, or B, if you're not willing to do that, maybe it's time for someone else to take over and volunteer and make that happen. Continue discussion.
As long as it's posted ahead of time, there's no reason why fluffy tournaments shouldn't be out there. So
I don't understand why, and I've seen this profusely on small scales. They just host a tournament, or one guy will host a tournament without doing any research whatsoever into what even the people who attend the store continuously want. Forget even what's your local radius, 2-3 hour radius that people are willing to travel want. People want to ask even the people that come to the store every week what they want out of a tournament. So I think a lack of research on that aspect makes things tremendously fall apart, and then people ask, well, why did nobody attend, or why did nobody like it? Do a little bit of research, at least ask the people around the store, and if you have a local forum or something, post it up and get some stuff out there for people to reflect upon. There's plenty of mass media available to you.
I agree, and definitely start 2 months out. Don't be the week before, I'm going to have a tournament.
Absolutely. Never enough warning. They're posting 2012 tournaments. GW sent out an email a month ago about 2012 tournaments already. There's no such thing as too much warning. You can always resend it again.
See, now, I do think it would be interesting, though, if you knew where people who had 40K armies lived, you netted them, brought them into the store completely trapped against their will, and you just said, this is the tournament. No, I'm totally kidding.
You're a hamster. I have a tournament for you. Go.
You ever seen Labyrinth?
You're
run around in your little ball.
Up here. I don't own a Black Templar army. Why am I playing this? Okay, so anyways, before we get too crazy here, question number 5. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being none, 10 being the absolute last rule that can't be questioned, how much power should the organizer wield? I'm getting all blurry. How much power should the organizer wield? And for this, we're going to start off with Tony Pony, the Sustainable Center.
I feel bad because last week I had an answer that rocked everybody else, and I actually got Doremicom to switch his answer. Now he's probably just going to agree with me, so just had to reflect that. I say 8. Yeah, you need to have a store, the store owner wield some power. You need to have a tournament organizer besides that. You need to have a third person who's either a local gaming guy who's not going to participate in the tournament, or be that floater in case you have an odd number, and they're kind of going to be like a ruling council, and they're going to make decisions on rules that are disputed and debated, and because because there's 3 of them, it'll never be a tie. You'll always get a sway one way or the other. And I think those are 3 influential people that you need. So 8 given out to 3 different people. And you can definitely get 3 people for a tournament, even if it's 10 people. If you can't get that, then you shouldn't be running it.
John, what's your thoughts?
I agree completely. There's no way to argue with that logic. You need 3 people. And between those 3 people, their rule is absolute. It's law, but keep tabs on it. I was at a tournament where they had a group of 3 people, but they shifted it depending on who was at the tournament. So they would favor the people that they knew over people that they didn't know. And you got to call them on that and say, well, you ruled this way on that guy. They got to keep the same rules for the same rules. I mean, the same ruling for the same rules. And as a player, that's your job to call them on that. You can't just be like, oh, okay, and then complain about it later. You got to do something about it.
All right. SolidSmurf, what's your thoughts?
I like the idea of the trifecta of rules with the power of 3, but also, See, I'm going because I have previous knowledge of this. I think at any given time it should be about a 7 to an 8. It shouldn't be one person ruling everything as a 10 with an iron fist. It needs to have balance. It needs to have balances. Exactly. It's how our government should work. But
all right. I'm actually going to slightly disagree with these guys. I really think that the overarching body, whatever it is, needs to have it to be a 10. The bottom line is, if you happen to be kind of a numbskull and side with particular people from a local gaming store, that's a problem. The larger the gaming tournament is, definitely the more people you need. I think almost universally, though, excuse me, even if you have a ruling body of 3, someone needs to have a 9, the other 2 have an 8, but together they need to have a 10. And the reason that is in play is because what you don't want is the havoc that can break out if players are truly questioning everything that's going on. There is some issue with making sure that if you are a player, do your research before you go to the tournament to make sure that the judging that has transpired there has been fair in the past. But at the same time, there needs to be a solid fist basically stating, this is the rule, continue play, don't slow down because we don't have a whole lot of free time. Let's go ahead and continue discussion.
I think that, you need to have, there shouldn't be a lot of continued discussion because there should be the rule book there with all the FAQs. I can't tell you all the times how long has Chaos Space Marine Codex been out, what Chaos Space Marine players will try to do with Lash. Oh, my Lash does this, does that. The counter strategy, that is just yank their FAQ on them and it'll tell you exactly what they do. If you have the FAQs there, if you have the rule book there and the FAQ to the rule book, it should be explicitly clear, and that should clear up 95%. It should be measuring issues. It should be little meticulous things, but it shouldn't be rules debates. All this should be very fairly clearly lined out, except for a codex like Grey Knights, which just dropped. The FAQ isn't out yet. Those are the only places we should be arguing. Otherwise, everything else should just be flying along.
You're making the assumption.
The best thing.
Sorry, Smurf, I didn't mean to step on you. Go ahead.
I saw really cool at one tournament. They actually had a binder, and it had little tabs for each army with the FAQ, and then they had a separate binder for the big rule book. And it was amazing. Like, I'm going to lean back in awesomeness, but it was great. Stuff went so smoothly because one guy was like, it doesn't do that. The other guy was like, yes, it is. Says so. And it was great.
What we are seeing here is if you're an event organizer for a tournament, realize that even though you're volunteering your time, it's a ton of work. And if you're a player of these tournaments, throw some appreciation to the people that are setting it up, especially if they're going to the lengths that are being discussed on this show.
Yeah, and I got to say, in an ideal tournament setting, there has to be a judge at every table. If there isn't a judge at every table, there will still be issues brought up. There has to be a judge who knows what they're talking about standing at every table. And that has to happen. You guys can disagree and pout and whine all you want to. It has to happen for it to be a fairly judged tournament.
Well,
it has to be
I think there
name tag.
I think there needs
with. the little hat and the matching uniform and the whistle at every single table.
I think there needs to be a clock, because there are some players who used to go into tournaments, and they might still do it. They did it in the Northeast, where it was, half my strategy is to argue with you. There's only 2.5 hours on the clock for this game. If I argue and debate every rule, I can get it down to a 4+, which is a lot better than actually following the rules, and I can eat into your turn time by arguing with you and telling you, no, it doesn't go like this. If you have a clock, we're playing the game for 2.5 hours. You each get half of that time. Once your turn starts, you hit the clock. When it stops, you stop the clock. When you run out of time, that's it. You're done. So you can't have people delaying the game and pushing back. That's the biggest issue, because it's not a rules debate, because there's no ruling saying how long your turn's supposed to last. It just says your turn, and people will exploit that to no end. That's why tournaments never get past turn 4, because people drag that stuff out.
Or they play Ard Boys and bring nothing but, one of those grots or whatever. Whole field. I have 10,000 figures to move back and forth. I've actually seen that.
And then they go like this. They measure each one.
Yeah.
And you're just like, move up the front row.
But the strategy of those armies is that I know with the clock, we're only going to get to turn 2 or turn 3, and my army's still okay. Hordes and very elite armies on the 2 extremes of the scale burn out by turn 6, turn 7. If not, by the very end of turn 5, they need to game end. If I know I'm playing a game for only 3 turns, it completely changes the way I structure my army and the way I move around the field. And if I'm coming to a tournament with a set amount of time, I know I can eat up this much time, and I can be successful. Even though I'm not breaking the rules, I'm not technically following them either.
Guys, I want you to make sure that you remember Tony's discussion on this particular question, because I'm going to return to it in part 3 when we have one of the future questions. If it's okay with you guys, I'm going to go ahead and jump on to question number 6.
I just got to say, I agree completely. Time clocks are an awesome idea. I'm thinking about running a tournament over the summer, and I'm buying chess clocks for every table. You just tap back and forth, because it's a great idea. It really is. I have never had an issue with it, because my turns like that, my opponent's doing their turn, I'm playing my turn in my head, and I get through turn 6 every tournament. But there are those people there that sit there and are like, oh, look, here's the fluff of this unit, and this is what it does, and this is how it acts. And it's just...
But just be wary, because 40K does allow your opponent to eat into your clock as they're counting their dice slowly to make armor saves and vol saves and stuff like that. We're going to jump on to the next question now. All right, question number 6, terrain. Which enhances the tournament experience more? A visually stunning board or a utilitarian board where there is absolutely no question what the rules should be regarding that terrain? And for this, we're going to go to John from WarGamePainting.
I'm going to give 2 answers really quick. The first one is, in a perfect world, you can get both. You can get both effectiveness and have it look pretty, like not playing on shoeboxes with felt put over them. But at the same time, to cater to the tournament, I would rather see a board that there can be no argument on. I mean, as much as it pains me to say it, you got to make it simple.
All right, Smurf, what's your thoughts?
I think there can be a balance, but for a tournament setting, it needs to be unified. It needs to be clearly stated what it is. There needs to be no trees.
Okay. There's too much hemming and hawing. We're going back to John from WarGamePainting. Pick one.
It's got to be blocks. It's got to be like empty boxes. It's got to be, this is what this is. And if you argue otherwise, go back to preschool because you're being retarded.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to cut and dry answer.
That's what I was saying.
Smurf,
but no, I got interrupted.
Yes, because you're going back and forth. Pick one or the other.
It needs to be standardized. It needs to be this, like what John said. This is this, that is that. Deal with it.
All right, Tony, what's your thoughts?
It needs to be 2D terrain that's flat with levels labored to it that equals heights and distances. Even if you do label all the terrain and you make it as natural as possible, it's still looking good. Models have odd weights and odd heights, and they fall over. So what do you do with that model that's technically on the lip but keeps falling over when it comes to term where there's a blast turner or an assault? If it's flat, there's no issue. If there's predefined heights, there's no issue. And that's what you got to do. It's boring, but it suits the tournament needs.
I have to agree that the beautiful terrain is beautiful until the tournament actually begins. And for this reason alone, unfortunately, I think you have to go with more of a utilitarian view on it. The problem is that even with the most utilitarian boards, the fact that hobbyists tend to really change the configuration of their model in such a way that their models look pretty, but it actually impacts ruling of terrain on a particular board also comes to a bit of an issue there. I love the notion of having beautiful terrain, but if you got to do it, make sure that it is definitely impassable terrain or something so that you really don't have to deal with rules governing it. Continued discussion. Kind of hard because we all said utilitarian, but...
Well, I think...
Go ahead. Good.
Are you sure? Oh, thanks, bud. I think it's, a big piece that comes into my mind is the Shrine of the Aquila produced by Citadel. It's this big, beautiful piece of terrain. I absolutely love it. But when you go to play on it, it's got an 8-inch gap between the first floor and the second floor. How do you play that? Because it says it's 6 inches up in the rules, but, it's 8 inches to get there. I mean, how do you roll that on a D6? What do? Do you roll a 6 and your guy moves 8 inches vertically? That's not fair. It's bogus.
There's a way around that. Only jump infantry and winged people can get up and down from that floor.
Or you sacrifice your shooting turn as well.
Here's the thing. There's a ladder that goes up to it. They modeled a ladder on there. And you're like, well, each dude just climbs the ladder by himself, and he's booking it, But when you go back to the rules, it's only 6 inches to get up there. And then you have dudes flying up the battlefield. I mean,
I think Warhammer Fantasy... I think Warhammer Fantasy Terrain actually does a great job, and with the rule set, it's either impassable and it's a structure and it's nice, or it's a fence and it takes up this much space, and we know the rules around fences and walls. And also in Warhammer Fantasy, when you go into a building, there's predefined rules on A, how much can fit in there, usually it's an infinite amount, B, how many floors there are, and there's no issue to get in and out and get to any floor that you want, and C, there's rules around how exactly it's fought, and we don't have to place models inside of it. So it looks impassable from a 40K perspective. From Fantasy, we just put our models next to it and say, okay, they're in the building and they're fighting or they're shooting or they're doing whatever. I think that's the closest you're going to get to having beautiful terrain that also has a rule set based around it.
All right. We'll move on to the next question. Question number 7, the no-show. Often a tournament has an odd number of players because someone doesn't show or the organizer does not want to exclude anyone, and including that last person makes it an odd number. How does an organizer deal with this scenario in a way that's fair, knowing that if you give a win to the people against the no-show, you're skewing the results? But if you give the player an average score, you've effectively kept them from ever placing, especially as the number of people in your tournament increases. And for this, we will start with... Who did we start with last time?
I don't know.
And for this, we're going to go to SolidSmurf.
Keep a ringer around, and if you don't need the spot for him, put him on as a judge.
Okay, so must have the ringer. What's your thoughts, Tony?
I think you have to have that third guy that I said that's just a player. He can be as a floater, but he can also operate as a judge. I think that's important. But I don't think you can be giving average scores or any scores. And if you have to cut somebody, tell the person, okay, you're the last 1 or 2 people on my list that signed up the latest. If you show up, unfortunately, all I can do is give you a refund. We can't have an odd amount of people here. And, I'll give you a refund. I'll give you a discount in the next tournament. But you can't give wins and ties to people that didn't play anybody.
John, what's your thoughts?
Yep. Last guy on the list got to go. You call him up before the tournament starts, say, sorry, bud, tournament's either full, didn't get enough people, it's not happening, whatever, come into the store, we'll give you your money back, because you cannot give out average scores. It will absolutely ruin somebody's day, because either A, they will sit around like I did at Last Ard Boys and not play 2 out of the 3 games that I was promised that I paid for. Well, I didn't pay for it, but I went on a road trip, so that kind of counts for paying it. But you get stuck with only playing 1 out of the 2 games, or you get average the score. You go from first place to 6th place. You're not even going to get a chance to top 3 now, or, it happens and the guy gets they feel bad for you and they give you 2 major victories and you won your first game, and so you win the tournament now after only playing 1 game. Whatever the scenario is, you gotta cut somebody or have somebody on staff that can just jump into the tournament.
All right, my thoughts. I actually think what you should do is see if the store owner or where you're organizing this can afford to give away a blister. Why is this important? Because the reality is that even though you have an odd number of players because of this, because someone doesn't show up and you're stuck with this extra player, you also have the problem with people leaving mid-tournament when they no longer are viable for place 1, 2, and 3, according to John's rules. If I've got 50 players and you've lost rounds 1 and 2, you're not placing. So sometimes when you get in that middle area, sometimes having that extra person who you've basically promised to blister as long as they're staying for the entire tournament to fill in those gaps, I kind of think that that's probably the best way to handle it in a way that is even and fair. Continued discussion.
I've never seen anybody leave a tournament midstream, although I do totally believe that that's a possibility and an opportunity. I don't think that you should be allowing, or, if people want to do that, you have to take a deposit up front and say the tournament's $20 to enter. You got to give me $30. You'll get $10 back at the end of the day if you stay the whole time. I mean, if people were leaving, I would just basically say you can't go to the next tournament. I mean, because you can't have that midstream leaving. That's like a baseball team walking off the diamond at the bottom of the 5th going, we're down by 12 runs, screw it. I mean, you can't do that. It affects so many people, and those are those D-bags that you have to get rid of if you're going to leave midstream. You paid for it, play your games.
Tony, that is accurate, but that's also at the professional level. For let's say if you're playing softball on a pickup league, because remember we're talking about effectively the same thing here. 40K tournament at a local gaming store level, not part of a grand tournament. You also have the scenarios in the softball type stuff, for instance, where when you're up by 10 points and it's ending 4, you're out. You won the game.
But that's part of the structured rules. It doesn't mean that I would not as a team stop mid-game. That's part of the rule set, and that's number 1. Number 2, that's a singular game, not multiple games during the day. So we might stop our game the bottom of the 4th because I got 10 run, but if it's a tournament, I got 3 games that day. That doesn't mean I don't go to the second game because, I lost the first one, now I can't win the trophy. I understand what you're saying, but it's a different kind of set, and if that really is the case and you're going to walk off midfield and not come back for your next game, then I don't want you in my league because you're not benefiting anybody.
And Tony does bring up a really good point about making sure that people who do leave should potentially be excluded from any kind of future games, especially at that particular location. The one actual time, though, that, and I have to say this, that I saw someone kind of leave for a legit reason, it was health related. Smurf.
I've seen it. I've seen grown men go to a tournament and they play the first round and they go, I have to work, and they leave, and it's just like, we had to tell 4 other people that they couldn't come today because we let you in, and now you're going to bail on it. It's bad sportsmanship. This isn't a problem with the tournament setting. This is a problem with manners. And people need to learn that you just can't, if you're going to commit to something, you got to commit to it. You can't just back out.
John, any further thoughts before we move on?
I give them the 3-strike mentality because, we had one exception at a tournament where the guy had to leave because his son was being born. We're like, you know what? We understand. It's okay. We're gonna let it slide this time. You can go. We understand. Like, that's fine. I wouldn't even give him one of the 3 from that. But if you just make some half-assed excuse and you're just like, work called. Okay, you're down a point. Dinner's ready. Down a point. my car is making weird noises. Okay, now you're done. You can't come back to these tournaments.
3 strikes is too many. I mean, that's 3 tournaments. How many tournaments am I going to be holding as a local event organizer? Now I broke down the tournament 3 times. That's 3 strikes as me as a customer. If you even get the customer that far to go, you know what, this happened too many times. I say those instances, those rare instances, yeah, they don't count against them. You get one kind of pass, and then the next time you're giving me a deposit that you'll get back if you stay the whole time. And if you don't that time, not only do you lose your deposit, but you're not allowed any more of my tournaments for at least a period of a year because you're just breaking down and you're destroying my system.
You know, I agree completely. And then there's...
Sorry, go ahead.
There's these other guys there for Ard Boys. This happens specifically. There's 2 major game stores in my area. There's Wings of Magic and Undead Planet. I'm giving them different names for whatever reason because it's on my channel. But people from Wings of Magic will call Undead Planet and reserve spots for Ard Boys. They'll say, yeah, we're going to come. We're definitely going to make it. And 3 or 4 people do this, and they don't show up, obviously, because they're playing at the other game store. And they do it just to screw the other game store. And that really is an issue, especially with things like Ard Boys where you're not paying to get into the tournament. So there's no like spot that you can put. Like you can't be like, come into the store, put down a deposit, you'll get it back at the day, whatever. You can't do that with Ard Boys. So it's this mentality, like Smurf was saying, it's not a problem with the tournament scene where this happens. It's a problem with people just being bad-mannered. I mean, it's like, really, why do people have this inclination to do this? I don't understand it.
I don't know, but I will tell you that we're at the end of part 2, and we'll be back with part 3 in just a moment.